For those of you who are watching online, we're having this lovely satsang at our new temple in Chennai. And last night, if you were watching, we were in a different room. We were in the small teaching satsang room, but that's filled with things now. So now we've moved to what will be the boutique. So we're just moving from place to place. And then if you watch on Saturday night, we'll be in the new temple room, which is just to my right. So it's really such a joy at this time here, because it's really the birth of a new magnetic center for where Master's teachings can be shared and practiced. So to continue with what Jyotish has been saying, that talking about Master's path of inner freedom, I'd like to just share with you some thoughts about continuing what is inner freedom, what blocks us from finding it, and how can we eliminate the things that keep us bound. So first of all, as we've been saying, inner freedom is the ability to align, one might say, our lower self with our higher self. One might say align our will with God's will, to live from a level of our soul awareness. And when we do this, we are acting, when we align our will with God's will, that brings us freedom. And you think, well, why should that be? You know, it was interesting. I was listening to a tape recording of a concert that had been recording sometime earlier in America when Swami Kriyananda was still alive. And different singers were singing, and some of them had very beautiful voices. Swami Kriyananda had a beautiful voice. And I was trying to listen. Now, is that Swamiji singing? It's a very beautiful voice. And then the next song came, and it was Swamiji. And I could immediately tell the difference. And I thought, well, why? That other man singing had a beautiful voice. But Swami's voice was free. It didn't have any ego principle in it. It wasn't, the other ones were a little bit trying to show what a beautiful voice they had. Swami's didn't have that. And I want to say, so I don't want you all to get self-conscious. Your voices are very pure, very pure. All the women and the men, and it's a joy to listen. But the ability to not be driven by the ego principle, but when you could think, well, why do we have freedom if we align our will with God's will? What's the difference between our will and God's will? Because our will is coming, it's circumscribed, it's limited by past karma, past habits, whereas God's will is a will-less will. It is a will without cause. It is a movement of consciousness that isn't coming from any particular point of view, from any particular perspective. That's why Master said in Autobiography of a Yogi, divine consciousness is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. Meaning that in the divine consciousness, every single spark, every single iota, atom, molecule beyond that level has its own consciousness, which all in totality forms a divine flow of energy. For us, it's almost as though we're trying to run with weights on our ankles, you know. We try to move forward, but we think, oh, this is what I did in the past, and this is what will this person think of me? And so every action, every thought, everything we say is conditioned by a limited perspective, the perspective of our own egoic consciousness. And when we meditate, even a little bit, we begin to expand beyond what do I want? What do I need? What is in my best interest? And, there are so many beautiful stories from the lives of saints where they've eliminated that ego perspective. There's a story of a very saintly sadhu who was just wandering through the countryside, and he came to a little village. And there were little boys there in the village, and they were playing and joking and running about. And here this strange sadhu walked through the village, and he had matted hair and covered with ashes. And so they began teasing him, and he was just inwardly free. He just kept walking on, walking on. And then the boys kind of got a little bit more rambunctious, a little more active in their teasing him, and he just didn't respond. And then one of them picked up a rock and kind of testingly threw it at the sadhu, and he just kept walking. And then that energy got revved up, and then they began throwing rocks at him and hitting him on the back and in the head, causing him to bleed. But he just kept walking. And then when he got back to the forest, his disciples saw him, and he was bleeding from his head and from his back. And they said, "Master, what has happened?" And he said, "Oh, we had such a good time in the village today. The boys were laughing and running and throwing stones. And there's absolute absence of ego principle. And that's what freedom is. For most of us, to a greater or lesser degree, we're always asking, even if it's subconscious, anything that happens in our life, does this benefit me or hurt me? And we make our decisions accordingly. But the more we grow in freedom and begin to transcend only the ego principle, the more we find that we can make choices that bring us to a higher perspective. I remember some years ago, at Ananda Village, another woman and I were working on getting out a big mailing that was going out to everyone on our mailing list. And I'm not saying this to draw attention to myself, but I'm sharing it because for me I was fairly new on the path, but it was a very, very good lesson to me. This other woman she had a lot of likes and dislikes, and it was always kind of what's best for me. And so we knew this was a big project. And I watch all of you working down here to develop the center, finish it. No ego, just what needs to be done. But so this woman and I were working on this project, and we knew it would take many, many days to do it, get it all finished, and all the envelopes stuffed and names on them and so forth. And just in the middle of it, Swamiji pulled up in a car at the office where we were working. And he said, I've been invited to give a lecture in this town, and we're going to go, and then we'll have a little holiday, and I'll get this lecture, and I have room in the car for one person. Which of you two would like to go? And it was such a beautiful gift. You might think, oh, that wasn't fair of him, but it was more than fair, because I looked at this I wanted to go, of course. I wanted to be with Swamiji and be at his lecture and help and then have a little holiday. But I knew this other woman was totally incapable of making that choice of not going. So I just said, Swamiji, I'll stay and I'll finish this project. She can go. And he said, very good. And so she went, and this woman isn't even a part of Ananda anymore because she went by likes and dislikes. But that night, I had a most beautiful dream about Master, and I knew it was the blessing, saying, you see, when you give up the ego principle, you have freedom, and that's what brings the presence of God, and that's what brings happiness. And so the more we can understand that when we're given a situation in life, whatever it may be, where our ego or our likes and dislikes say, oh, this is what I want, this is what I want. But there's another part of you that thinks there's a higher course of action here. And I know it. Give me the strength to take the higher course of action. When every time we make that decision, we increase our inner freedom and we break the hold that the ego has on us. And it's a gradual process. The great ones, one time Master was disciplining one of his disciples, and the man had a spiritual immaturity, and the man said to him, well, that's fine for you to say, Master, but you're a master, you can do that. And Master got very firm, and he said, what do you think made me a master? It was by facing situations and choosing the way of freedom, choosing the way of ego transcendence. And so what he was saying was, don't think I'm special. Don't think I was born this way. I have walked the same path you have walked. It's just that I've been doing it for a longer time, and I've achieved the state of inner victory and inner freedom that allows me to have this state of consciousness. And there was also a disciple of Master who wanted to get married. And so he came to Master and he said, oh, I've met the most wonderful woman, and she's just everything I envisioned. And Master became very still and quiet. And he said, she's not the right one. He didn't meet her, but he knew from intuition. And the man was he wasn't free in his decision. He said, oh, you don't know, Master. She's wonderful. And Master said, you choose. Your guru is telling you not to do that. But the man said, no, you don't know. And he went off and he married this woman. And it was a disaster. She was just after his money and took all his money and left and so forth. And then some time passed and the man got his equanimity back. And then he went to see his guru and he said, the strangest thing happened. I was at the home of a friend, and there was this woman that I met there. She was the sister of the man. And she was not at all someone that I was interested in, but she kept following me around, and she wouldn't leave my side. And Master paused, and he said, she's the right one. And the man said, oh, please don't be right, Master. You were right the last time, but this time he learned his lesson. So he did marry that woman, and they were very happy together. But the point is, we see how many instances where our desires push us in one direction, and that's not freedom. If we can just have that little hesitancy, that's why some sadhus in India, they'll take their food, and rather than enjoy their food, they'll put ashes on it so they don't even enjoy that. Master said that's not really our way. Our way is more just to be detached on an inner level. We don't have to, life has enough difficulties without putting sand in our food. But but in any case, so the state of inner freedom comes when we are able to choose the promptings of our higher self, which are guidance from God. And the more we can do that, and will we always succeed? No, we won't always succeed. Jyotish has not bought those cookies, but this is a heroic example of. I don't even know what those cookies are. I think it was before my time. Anyway, but what keeps us from being able to make these decisions, the right choices, the right flow of energy towards freedom? 1, past karma, and 2, past karma of former lifetimes, and 2 bad habits that we've developed in this lifetime. And it's like a filter over the freedom of our soul. The soul says, oh, I want to go and meditate. I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock and I'm going to drive over or get over to the center and I'm going to meditate. And then the past karma says, oh, you used to meditate in another life and you didn't find God, so why bother? And we're always pulling, our higher self is pulling one direction, the lower self is pulling in another direction. And this is because of past karma. And, in Master's interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, he has a brilliant and extremely helpful explanation when Arjuna asked Krishna to take him out at the first chapter, take my chariot out between the 2 armies. And he looks at the army of the Kauravas, his enemies, but he sees uncles and grandsires and cousins and relatives and his Bhishma, who his mentor. And he says, I can't kill them. This is my family. Maybe they've chosen animosity towards me, but better to let them kill me. I would get bad karma if I killed them. And Master's interpretation is that it's not just the relatives. Each one of those characters is a symbolic representation of a part of our own consciousness. They are a part of ourself that represents past karma and past bad habits. But they're familiar to us. They feel like our own family. And so Arjuna says to Krishna, I can't kill them. I'd rather, and he lets his bow drop. And Master explains, that's the devotee saying, but maybe these are bad habits. Maybe this is bad tendencies, but they're familiar to me. Who will I be if I lose that tendency to get angry or to have my own way or to be selfish? And we're afraid to give those up. And when Arjuna drops his bow, Master explains, that's the devotee. The bow represents the spine, the erect spine in meditation. And when he drops the bow, it's the devotee slumping over and giving up the inner battle of meditation against the lower tendencies. And then the beautiful discourse of the Gita begins when Krishna, as Master says, as if smiling, begins to explain. When he says you can't kill them because the soul is immortal, there's a deeper meaning. Because what he's saying is nothing can be destroyed. So you take the energy from one bad habit and you think, well, what will I be without it? But that energy is transmuted. You don't lose that energy. You don't lose your sense of self. It's only raised up to a higher level. And so Master emphasizes over and again the way to overcome past bad karma or bad habits from this lifetime is the use of willpower. And that's where all of our meditation techniques and the rest of the Gita is Krishna explaining how to fight the battle of life. I wanted to mention, I just saw this today, October 6th, 1920. Master gave his first talk in America. So that's 96 years ago. The first talk in Boston. And it was on the science of religion. It's thrilling to think, isn't it? And so in his Gita commentaries, he's saying, be like Arjuna, the warrior. Fight. And then at the end of the Gita, Arjuna says, now I have understood, my Lord. And he takes up his bow and he fights the battle. Well, so for all of us, when we see those parts of ourselves, maybe it's the tendency to gossip. Maybe it's the tendency to be judgmental of other people. Whatever it is. And it seems, well, if I stop judging other people, then then I lose my discrimination. But judgment is coming from the ego. It's not from that point of view of center everywhere, circumference nowhere, where you realize I'm just as much in that person as I am in this person. Master once went up to one of his disciples and said, "You have a sour taste in your mouth, don't you?" And the man said, "Yes, how did you know?" And Master said, "I'm as much in your body as I am in my body," because there wasn't the limiting aspect of the ego. And so using our willpower and also using our discrimination and watch, you actually can become aware of the difference when you are acting from your egoic likes and dislikes and when you are acting from freedom. And the more you become aware of it, the more then you need to use your willpower to fight and say, I will not be pulled into that habit. A friend of mine told me recently, she said, I have had in the past a tendency to speak negatively about other people. And so she said, I've developed this practice. If I start speaking negatively, like saying, Dharmarajan always burns the tea, whatever it might be, then she always says, just like me. And I thought that's a very good practice because it for her, because it just takes the strength out of the negative expression towards other people, because you say, I do the same thing. And so the more we can use our willpower, being aware where we're caught in egoic patterns, and then to consciously move towards away from the self-limiting to the self-expansive. And then why do we want inner freedom? What is the fruit of inner freedom? The fruit of inner freedom is true happiness and joy, ultimately ananda, of bliss. Because the little self is always restless. It's always feeling, I'm a little bit off here. There's something more. There's a greater aspect of me that I'm not yet tuning into. And the more we move towards that sense of freedom, you can look at pictures of Swamiji at the end of his life, all through his life, but particularly at the end, where his body was very ill. He didn't have much strength. He couldn't walk unaided. And yet you look at those pictures and he's inwardly free. And how do you know? Because of the bliss that he radiated from his face. So ultimately, all these efforts, they're not just kind of, I don't know, like learning a new skill and then, okay, now I've learned not to come from my ego. The more we learn to live from a sense of alignment of our will with God, every step of the way, the more we feel an inner victory and also increasing joy, until finally, like Anandamayi Ma, just wandering through the countryside in bliss, whether she was, wherever she was, if she left in a moment, if she stayed, that inner freedom. And it doesn't mean that we give up family or jobs or home, but the inner freedom to live in this world as a free soul. This is the task that has been assigned to each one of us. And through the grace of the Guru and our own desire to know that inner freedom, I think we can all find it. So.